Hi, I'm Maria Cadabite and welcome to this BAFTA Q&A for Monsoon. We are joined by writer-director Hong Khaou, producer Tracy O'Riordan and stars of the film Henry Golding and Parker Sawyers. Welcome all.
Hi.
Hope you're all keeping very safe and well from wherever you all are in the world right now. Hong, I want to begin with you. The Monsoon kind of delicately feels on some levels on some levels it feels like a delicate autobiography, and I just wanted to know how much of that kind of is true and how much of that kind of fed into the genesis of the film.
Thank you for having us. It's really kind of you. I think I wouldn't say it's autobiographical, but I think there's a lot of personal elements of me in it. I think a lot of, I would say I poured a lot of my own experience in there, but I think with anything, with any film, there's room to just to augment it and just to make it work in a dramatic way for the film. So, for example, I'm not Vietnamese, and my parents didn't live through the Vietnam War. I was born in Cambodia, but my parents migrated to Vietnam, and then from Vietnam came to the UK. So it's a lot of the themes and the feeling of feeling dislocated, are all very, very kind of things that I struggle with, I think.
That feeling of dislocation kind of following on from your debut film, Lilting, kind of how is it connected to kind of that first feature, and how is it maybe a companion piece in some way, and kind of the notions of kind of connecting to the idea of belonging and a connection to a past that you know is part of you, but has a level of displacement?
Yeah, I would say it's similar, but the thing is that the theme is so big. There are so many kind of branches within that. It isn't any. So on the one hand, you could say it's similar to Lilting, but I think equally is tackling a very different type of subject. And I think I would say it's similar to Lilting in the sense that it's cultural. It's about the feeling. Kind of feeling like a foreigner and in England, but now it's about somebody returning back to his kind of birthland, and that sense of without memory and language and being unable to connect to that land. And I don't know. I think it's very much different from Lilting. I know a lot of people seem to say it's very. I think a companion piece would be a better way to describe it.
And kind of the idea of returning to kind of a homeland that you don't perhaps remember, but still resonates in your present. How much of that was involved in you developing and writing the script for Monsoon? Did you go back to kind of Vietnam, where you spent a part of your childhood, and how did that impact on kind of the writing of the script?
A lot. I returned back to Vietnam very late. I came to England in 1983, and I only went back in my late 30s. And the script got into Sundance Screenwriters Lab, and they gave me a grant, and I was able to use that grant to go back to Vietnam for the first time. And previously, I couldn't really afford to go back. I think the experience of going back very much fed into the script. Before that, there was a really, really early rough draft which you have to do to get into the lab. And I think once I went back to Vietnam, a lot of my journey from Saigon to Hanoi, and just the experience of just what it means to go back, fed into the script a lot. And after that, I went back to Cambodia as well for the first time. But oddly, I don't have memories of Cambodia. I was born there, but I left when I was a baby. So I think that second journey also heavily informed this feeling that I've always felt slightly kind of this tug and pull I have growing up in the UK.
And Tracy, I believe you came onto the project quite early, kind of in the early days of development, kind of working. How did you and Hong work together, kind of for it to come into fruition?
Well, it's going back a bit. So Hong, if I get some of the timings wrong, it just feels sort of like a lifetime ago that we filmed it, let alone that we sort of started developing it. So I think Hong you'd been to Sundance, and that had been quite rigorous for you, Hong. And I think you did have a script, but I'm not sure you wanted me to see that script. So we sort of started with I remember distinctly us having a one-pager and looking and working from a one-pager, and then we discussed you going back there, and that really going, I think I was involved before you went back for the first time. And then Hong worked also with a script consultant called Lila Rawlings. And I think it took about 2 years, Hong?
In the writing process?
Yeah.
I think so. I can't remember. I mean, yeah, I think we got involved, and then that's when I went back to Vietnam, and I really can't remember. I think 2 years. It felt a long time. We were writing it back and forth, and then BFI Lizzie really fed into the script, and it took it to another direction.
Yes, because I think some of the big changes. Actually, I think at one point it was Cambodia. I'm not sure how relevant this is, but it was. He was Cambodian. Yeah. But the journey was still, and we talked a lot about the Vietnamese American War, because you had a fascination in that, Hong, and the types of films that had been made about that war, and also one very distinct thing, and this may come up, but the character of Lewis completely changed in our development of it as well. So there were certain things that really kind of, and that was one of the big things I think that unlocked something else in it, Hong. Maybe Hong might want to talk a little bit about that changing that, because that's quite interesting.
I think, oh God, I'm just trying to remember. No, yeah, in the early days, so Lewis was Hank, and Hank was a white American. And along the way, I think after the notes from the BFI came in, one of the big notes I sort of remember was that they felt that the white American experience in the American Vietnam War was very, it's been the dominant perspective, right? And it's been something we've seen often. And then once that came in, I felt very much liberated to just go off and do it my way, or a more, let's say, a more nuanced way. And that's when I started to think about having Hank become Lewis and have him as an African American, because I like the idea that because in some ways Lewis helps Kit through his journey, and there's something quite interesting seeing that it wasn't this kind of white kind of imperialist person helping another foreigner who is kind of British Vietnamese returning back to Vietnam. And I think it made it a bit more layered and interesting, because it's something we don't often see, I think.
Mm. Well, and Parker and Henry, kind of coming off the back of what Hong's just said, the idea kind of Lewis and Kit's journey, they're both in a way not giving anything away to each other. Kind of so much of their relationship is in the unsaid, but also filters down from kind of both familial trauma they've both suffered for generations, and both of them ending up in Vietnam. So just coming kind of from that point of view, Henry and Parker getting involved in Monsoon and the notions of kind of the bringing together of kind of past, present, and future. Just how did you both work together kind of to build kind of that on-screen relationship, and also kind of have this, so much of what their relationship is plays in the unsaid and in the silences, but you afford the audience the interpretation to what that is. I'm just wondering how you worked with Hong to kind of build that, you know, on-screen relationship.
Yeah, I think the relationship between Kit and Lewis really was, it wasn't the core sort of fuel moving along the journey. It became an aspect, and again, with you pointing out the past, future, and present, I always felt that the three characters that Kit actually sort of met with, his cousin, Lynn, and Parker, his cousin being his past, the present being Lewis, and Lynn being the future generation of Vietnam, who the Vietnamese that are trying to move on from the atrocities of the war. I always felt that the relationship between the two, they found a bridge emotionally. In some ways, they were both kind of, I suppose, sympathetic to each other's cause, and almost aligned each other in kind of journeying and almost sort of healing together in a sense. And I think that was what kind of shone through. And those moments of quiet and subtleties that Hong really kind of put in through the direction of the scenes, I think it spoke volumes. And you know, it was unnecessary to kind of put into words exactly what they both were feeling. But I think Hong achieved like this amazing nuances within the movies, and kind of, it was those quiet moments which I thoroughly loved the most, actually.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think what we brought to it as actors, or as people, I guess, both Henry and I have both, well, yeah, still for you, we live in countries that we were not raised in. And so I think we brought that to the characters anyway. So we had this immediate rapport, Henry and I, when we first met. We understood sort of being in a foreign land and different customs and so forth. So to bring that experience to the characters and on screen, and how when you meet people, when you're in that kind of situation, a lot goes unsaid, or if you're unsure about something, perhaps you don't vocalize it, but it is said in the eyes or physicality. And then when you find a connection, it's often deeper if you're in not your homeland. So it was interesting that we both had that experience, and then we're playing characters who are coming from other lands.
And Hong Kong comes to kind of just talk about kind of the casting of Henry and Parker as Kit and Lewis. I meant obviously so much of the film relies on Kit. I think kind of you're in nearly every single scene, Henry, and it's a quiet, contemplative role as well. Kind of, you know, there's a lot there that you have to kind of hold together throughout. Just Hong, I don't know if you did when you were writing, if you had someone in mind, or if you kind of, you know, or if you just, you know, put the process of writing down first and then kind of went to the casting and, you know, tried to find your Kit.
No, I didn't have anybody in mind. I literally just wrote it, and then, you know, we cross that bridge when we get there. I mean, the process to find Kit, I mean, like you say, Kit is in every frame of the film, really. And Kit, you know, we're with him all the time, and sometimes we're very close to him, sometimes we're very far away watching him. But we should feel like we're going on this journey with him, and it really needed somebody to kind of give us access to those internal struggles and tussles that he has inside. So we searched far and wide, didn't we, Tracy? My God, we searched everywhere, really. I feel like we searched the UK, we went to Australia, as far as Australia, Canada, I think even Holland, and I
mean, even I was originally cast as Kit. I don't know if people know that, and then we switched.
Really?
Then we found Henry. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, they found someone better for the role.
No, there's you were cast before Henry But not as.
No, I mean,
Parker, so you were cast by Carmel Cochran, is that right? And then,
yes.
and then you had to kind of, and then is it Amy Hubbard that cast you? Kind of that changed throughout, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at that time we saw Parker first with another actor, but we didn't feel the actor had what the film needed, but also we couldn't cast Parker yet until we find Kit, because I think everything coalesces around Kit, and then I mean, at that time we had a taping in from Henry, but none of us knew who, you know, the star that Henry is now. It was just we were just all quietly quite excited by this recording, and we did more kind of virtual self-taping, and then eventually me and Tracy felt like there's something quite special here. I needed to be in the same room as Henry and just do a kind of a workshop or a kind of a rehearsal with him in person. And I flew over to LA, and I think that's when it really sold it to us. It really because
technically after LA we had another we had another audition. So I didn't sell it that well.
No, it was really, I mean, to be truly, we went to because there was a concern. I hadn't seen anything Henry had done, and we couldn't. He had done 2 feature, Crazy Rich Asian and A Simple Favor, which we weren't able to watch because they hadn't been released, and so it was just, there was always this kind of concern. But I think when you meet them in person and you start seeing what they do, I mean, truly, like when I was in the room, I felt all of what really worked for me with Henry was that I felt his emotion was very honest. And the film is, like you said, is a very quiet film. It's not a shouty type of film. And it's the kind of acting that I love, but it's also the right kind of acting for this film. And I think sometimes it can be slightly over, I don't know, arched or mannered. And I felt Henry brought something that I really loved. He was just really honest with his emotion. That was the thing I wanted.
Henry, when you kind of read the script and really wanted the role, what was it in Kit? What was the essence of it that you saw that really attracted you and made you really want to do this?
I think the sense of displacement, it really kind of reflected a lot of my personal journey from growing up and being born in Malaysia to sort of a British father and a Malaysian mother, moving back to the UK, not ever feeling British enough, never feeling Asian enough. And so whenever I was in both those parts of the world, it was kind of like, who am I? You know, this search for identity. And I think that's something that Kit goes through. He has a premise of going back to Vietnam to find a resting place for his parents' ashes, and try to get a better grasp of his history and his being. And I think, as we all would, he arrived with a bit of bravado in feeling like, trying to convince himself, I am Vietnamese. I'm gonna come to this city and it's gonna feel like I'm coming home. But often it isn't the case. You know, when you can't speak the language, when you've never been in the culture, like sort of the Vietnamese culture, and growing up in the UK, it's such a crescendo of noise and smells and cultural differences. And that was what really kind of drew me to the role, is his struggle for his kind of inner identity. You know, he has a lot of turmoil. He has a lot of kind of family issues, which he was never able to kind of talk through with his parents. His parents left Vietnam for a reason, and good reason at that. And I feel as though they made the decision to call the UK home. And so Vietnam, for Kit growing up was never talked about. It was never discussed. It was never kind of, hey, why did we move, or what did we do? It was kind of always shrugged off. So for him to go back to Vietnam, it was to find the answers that he'd always been yearning for. And so through his journey, it's a journey of trepidation. It's not really understanding what he's kind of uncovering. And I think you see his progression getting comfortable with the character that is Vietnam. From in the beginning, it's like a fish out of water. He's struggling and wrestling with the traffic. He's kind of just really out of his depth. But then slowly he meets these people that really kind of warm his feelings towards the country. You know, in Lewis, in his cousin, in Lynn. So I think for me, it was really kind of having those identifiers in that character and feeling as though I can give truth to that.
Okay, just want to pick up on the kind of two things you said. One, Vietnam as a character, which I'll come back to, but then a really important thread for me in the film, you just touched on it, was the idea of finding answers in somewhere that you're displaced from, but you find alien at the same time, but then also not being able to find those answers from your own kind of immediate family and your parents and that familial link, kind of the idea that, you know, the proximity to a parent or grandparent's life to trauma is or to a place they're from, is so hard to share, kind of. And then, you know, 2 or 3 generations down the line, kind of, it still is a bit of an anomaly to those people, kind of, and it's just that such an kind of so prevalent, obviously, in the film, and such an important theme. And just kind of from looking at personal experience for more of you, maybe Hong, if I come to you, the idea of kind of, I don't know if you don't want to talk about this, but the idea of kind of speaking to your family about their own life and how much of that kind of is fed, and if that is true to your own experience, kind of the idea that, you know, it's so hard for your immediate family sometimes to talk about kind of these things that they've gone through, that you have to then kind of explore it in a much kind of wider way, in the way that you have done.
No, I that's a really good point, and I think it's very much my experience with my parents. So my parents flee Pol Pot as he was, you know, coming into through Cambodia, and they fled to Vietnam, and I left when I was just a baby. So, and it's a very difficult thing. My mum particularly really doesn't talk about it that much, rarely if at all, and she finds it very painful to talk about it. And I think it's that thing that as you get older, you realize, I think, so when you come from a background where your parents are fleeing a kind of a war-torn or a traumatic event, I think so much of what they build in the West is contingent on forgetting some of those past traumas, you know. And I think it was their way, and I think this is my own process. I think it's my reading of it. I feel it's their way of liberating me, and therefore Kit. That's how I say that. Is their way of liberating Kit to be whoever he wants to be, so that he's not so much confined by the past. And I wanted to kind of go against that romantic notion, and that, you know, the idea that we, in order to go forward, we need to go back to our past and somehow find the answers there. But for somebody like Kit, who has no memories and doesn't have the language, and the parents doesn't speak about it, there comes a moment where he has to decide, and he has to kind of draw that line and decide it, you know. So it was that. I think those were the things that was very important to me to have in Monsoon. The themes that I wanted to talk about in that sense.
And Parker, kind of obviously the Kit's character and his father being a Vietnam veteran, and that affecting him to the point of suicide, kind of in terms of life mimicking art. But, you know, you have a similar familial link in terms of kind of families being involved in the Vietnam War, and how much of that obviously was important for you to display in this as well.
Yeah. My father, he passed in 2006, but he was a Vietnam vet. And it's one of those things where he never spoke about it. I mean, we only found out things after he had passed, and we went through his belongings at my grandmother's house and so forth. And so part of going back, I mean, one, what attracted me to the script in general was one sort of representation, like I'd never seen somebody my skin tone in a movie like that in Vietnam. I had never seen one. It might exist, but I had never seen one. So I thought that was amazing. And then the connection, yeah, a very personal connection. And having moved to London, I learned so much about myself when you can only rely on yourself. And there's it's not a language barrier here, but the cultural barrier to overcome. I thought it'd be interesting to play a character who moved, who said, I'm gonna go out on my own and find out who I am, combining who I am and also whatever's in my passed down trauma and my genes or whatever. So yeah, it was sort of therapeutic, cathartic to be there and walk the same streets that my father was on 40 years prior, 50 years prior. Yeah, it was great. I mean, so it was, you know, it's a beautiful film, but as a personal experience, I'm so glad that I have it in my heart now.
Kind of walking on those same streets, Tracy, just kind of getting to the actual nitty gritty of the filmmaking. How difficult was it to film in Vietnam, and kind of were there certain protocols and loopholes to go through, or was it all smooth sailing?
It's really smooth. I don't know if I could give, you know, it was really low budget, so I have to hand it to Henry and Parker for signing up, because, you know, doing anything low budget is hard, but when you're doing it in a country where you don't speak the language and it's culturally very different, and you want to also really respect that country, and you have a huge amount of respect for that country, and so there's a lot of responsibility. But I think that Hong's script was so beautiful, and I think it really spoke to people, and and Hong is just, you know, it's just a real pleasure to work with, and also someone I felt really confident with going on this journey. And we had really good support from the BFI and BBC, who just trusted us to go there. And sort of looking back, I kind of think, wow, it's sort of you know, how did we get that? We were sort of suddenly 2 years working on the script, and then very quickly things came together. And I think the one thing was that Vietnam doesn't really have, it's got a very young film community and structure. Thailand has a huge one, is very established, and it's just sort of getting established in Vietnam. So going out there, we weren't quite sure, like, Ben cracking the DOP, we didn't quite know what exactly type of camera he would be filming on, and whether it, you know, until we got there, when he looked, you know, we looked at the equipment houses. So there was uncertainty, and also the challenges were, we had 2 windows to shoot it in. We sort of had a spring window before the rains came, where we could get crew, because there was availability, and if we pushed till after the rains in November, there would be no crew. And I think at one point we were faced with, well, you can film in the spring with a crew, but we hadn't cast Henry at that point, so we would have had a crew but no cast. And then if we waited till November, we would have had a cast but no crew. So there were lots of kind of things to weigh up, but actually once we got Parker and then Henry came on board, it actually moved very, very quickly. But I have to say, hands off for everyone. We made it on a tiny budget, and everyone came together. And you know, I think you know, I mean, I love the film and I'm so proud of it, and I think we sort of you know, we pulled off something that was, I think we should all be very proud of ourselves.
Kind of, obviously the 4 of you here kind of pulling together kind of the international element of the film, but kind of using local crew and cast on. How did that elevate it for you?
I think it was really important to shoot it in Vietnam. I mean, there was early talks of, you know, going to Thailand to fake it, which other international projects tends to do, but but because this is about the present day of Vietnam, and the country of Vietnam is very much a character in the film, you know. I didn't, so it was, and to give it the authenticity was really, it was so important. And I wanted to portray Vietnam as a thriving country, not as a victim. I think so often when you see Vietnam in other films, I often see it, you know, either they show Vietnam as this kind of poor victim, or they would over romanticize this colonial past, and it's full of exoticism. I wanted to show a modern kind of ambitious Vietnam.
You kind of even notice that with just even the opening shot, kind of that aerial shot of all of those cars. You could kind of almost kind of be anywhere, but it just you know, kind of sets it to kind of metropolis feel.
Yeah, that was the idea. The idea is we wanted to start with a car, and of course when you go and watch a film, you know where it's set already. But the idea is you start with cars, which feels like it could be anywhere in any city, in any metropolis. And as you pull out and further, you start to get a sense. When you see the motorped, you get a sense of maybe it's Southeast Asia or East Asia, and then it opens up bigger and bigger. That was the idea.
Got quite a few questions that have come through. Let's see. So Simon Smith is asking, I noticed in the cinematography that the actors are often positioned at the far edge of the frame, and I'd like to hear about why you made that choice.
Yeah, so me and Ben talked about this a lot. We were really inspired by the idea. I think, oh God, I hope I got, is it Bradford Young? He does that a lot, and on one particular film, he did it a lot. And we wanted to do that and be bold about it. And I think in a very simple answer to that was because when they first meet, we did that particularly in the scene where Kit and Lewis meet for the first time at the bar, and we wanted to create a slight feeling of discombobulation, just that is not quite right. That was all, and we wanted, yeah, that was the intention. I mean, the cinematography is a massive thing. It was the language of it was really important for a film like Monsoon, when it's very quiet, when it's not so plot driven. You know, it's about the internal feelings that Kit is going through.
There's quite a few questions about the cinematography, so I might pull them all together kind of one go. So Rebecca Clark is saying the cinematography was amazing both in the city and in the countryside. How important was this to making the film? And then Burton Cromer is asking, saying you used quite a few distant shots of Henry. I watched your film almost a month ago, so apologies if my memory is slightly off. And that gave the film a distinct feeling. Can you talk about the use of these scenes and whether any in particular directors or cinematographers influenced this use? I know you've just kind of mentioned a couple. I don't know if you wanted to speak more to that.
There wasn't any particular cinematographers that we were following with, but I think what was really important was I wanted this film that I wanted us or the audience to be slightly. Is that I wanted us to watch a very personal story unfold, but I didn't want to watch it from afar. I wanted us to be only a couple of steps behind Kit, really. So sometimes you feel like you're observing him, but in scenes that are very heartfelt and maybe a bit more stirring, I wanted us to kind of be there with him, you know. And that was always a really important thing. It's a really sounds like I'm contradicting, but we didn't want it to be an observational from afar, even though you have these long shots from afar. But the idea is that you're watching somebody's personal journey, and to be with him, be alongside him. That you're not always, you enter scenes and you don't quite know what the scene is, but it will reveal itself to you. And we shot a lot of it off reflection as well, as a way to, so when Kit first arrived in Vietnam, it was really important that I wanted to use reflection as a way to separate him from his birthland, to give a gentle separation. And as he slowly, like Henry was saying at the beginning, that as he acclimatizes, there's a physicality to the character. So he was far more ingrained in the city, but in terms of cinematography, we started to also remove that motif so that he's part of the city and no longer separated by this reflection.
Oliver Rowe, thank you for writing a film about gay men, which is not centered on them having a traumatic relationship with their sexual orientation. How deliberate was this in the writing of the script? There's what's so great about the film is the kind of, there's no baggage when it comes to sexuality. It's not about that. It's instead about obviously finding out their cultural identity. And so just following on from Oliver's question, kind of, you know, how important was it for you kind of just to make it about kind of seeking out cultural identity rather than sexual orientation?
That was really important for me. I felt that the characters' struggle, that their struggle for themselves wasn't about their sexual identity. It was always the sense of cultural and national identity. And it was a really big thing for me. I feel like, it's something that's been done before. So I think it was, you know, it felt like so often we see gay characters and it's always who they are is defined by their sexuality so much, and then the rest of the film becomes about that. And I wanted to talk about themes that were really big and important to me, and but equally I wanted them to be absolutely comfortable in their skin, which is why that last scene in the bar, I really wanted that kiss to be absolutely wholeheartedly, emphatically, a celebration of that.
Okay, I think we've got time for one last question. So Anita Luton-Mooks is saying, thank you for this talk and for your film, which I've now seen 3 times. Hong and Tracy and all the actors, could you talk exactly about what kind of prep was on the ground and what you had to do before shooting in these locations? It looks extremely smoothly produced, but sure, it must have been tricky at times, i.e. rehearsals, locations, things changing on the day. Let's go to Henry and Parker first.
I thought it went really smooth too. I'm in Tracy's camp. No, I mean, we were so lucky. I think it rained once that kind of like we had ourselves, no, maybe a couple times, but we would hide out in a cafe. We'd get like some local snacks, some hot soup, and we'd sit and wait it out. I mean, in the monsoon in Southeast Asia, it rains maybe on clock, like by clockwork, probably about 1 in the afternoon till about maybe 3 o'clock. So you know that window, we need to get the morning shot. We need to sort of like wait out the afternoon for a little bit of rain and then continue filming. The challenges, I don't see that. We had the most amazing local crew who took care of us to no bounds. Like they did literally everything and made sure that we knew exactly what we were getting ourselves into. They looked after us when the traffic was insane, when the locations were, you know, it isn't easy. And it's very difficult for film crews to have any sort of what you call it, like sort of big kind of caravans for everybody to change in, for
trailers.
Wardrobe to be in, for trailers. I haven't been on a film set for a year. So.
What was your trailer like in Vietnam?
Oh, I had a plastic stool and a bag of hot tea or cold tea. But you know, that was part of what we signed up for. It's such an experience, and I think Parker can attest to how much fun we had on set.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, the only stumbling block for me was Hong kept asking my opinion on cinematography and setting up shots. And I was like, dude, that's not my job. So that kind of delayed us every day that I was at. No, it was amazing. It was a great, I mean, cast, crew, everything. It was, it was one of those dream jobs, really. It was just, I love the culture over there. It was very interesting. Henry was trying to get me to taste durian. No, what is
Durian.
Durian.
Yeah, don't bring that into any kind of confined space. Anyway.
I didn't have it.
He knows so much about food in Vietnam. All sorts. You were trying to get me to eat this egg as well. I was struggling.
Yeah, the balut, the fetal egg. It's like chicken soup. All in.
So is that almost filled, almost hatched kind of chick? But it's nice.
So it has like good hearty rain sort of snacks.
I'll take the durian. Yeah. And yeah, finally, Tracy and Hong, kind of your final thoughts kind of on that question, but just in general, kind of on, I know it's obviously been a really difficult year and this film hasn't kind of played out in as many cinemas that you would have liked it to have done, but, you know, kind of what are your messages for the audiences at home?
Well, I just wanted to say just quickly, because we were helped by Indochina, this company called Indochina Productions, and without them, we wouldn't have been able to get our permits and set foot in the country and film in that way. They were really helpful with us. They're a brilliant company, and Nicholas Simon helped us get in there. And then we found us this incredible crew, and that really helped us. And things are done differently. You know, we had to get used to doing things in different ways, but I think we all kind of got our heads around that quite quickly, but due to having this intro to the country. I think it's been so strange because we haven't had the release we would have liked. Everything we'd do, you know, at this point, you know, I'm really grateful for BAFTA for doing these Q&As. This is really important. But I was in my house in West London thinking, God, at this time I'd be jumping on the Bakerloo line. I'd be like running down Piccadilly to get there in time. I'd be seeing Hong. I'd be possibly seeing Parker. You know, Henry. I don't know whether you know. Obviously,
I'd fly over.
Henry would have flown over.
Of course.
It just would have been, and that's the joyous thing I think about making films is what I've really realized over this year is the people you meet and having those experiences, doing something that you're passionate about, and how lucky we are when we work on a film where we, you know, people believe it. Sorry, my son is just walking. You know, so all to be in BAFTA in Piccadilly now, but I just think it really has drummed it into me how much how great it is to be working when I'm working with Hong, with Parker and Henry, and you know, brilliant people who work in this industry, and I miss it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's really amazing that we had Henry and Parker, and they came on board because they liked the script, and it was really, everybody really worked their socks off in difficult conditions. You know, Vietnam wasn't easy just because the climate, the humidity. We didn't have to. Everybody was coalescing around this project. So, and it was really. I felt that was the lasting memory I have really of it. In that, it was really. Good.
My lasting memory was Parker Sawyers trying to kill me on that motorbike. Do you guys remember that?
Excuse me, Henry.
Parker Sawyers cut the brakes off a motorbike and told me to get on it.
Henry almost had an accident in the middle of Ho Chi Minh. It was something to be seen.
Did you get your motorcycle license in Vietnam, Parker?
No, absolutely not. No, I barely rode it. We barely got the shot.
I just want to thank you all. Thanks for joining kind of BAFTA audience and me this evening. Hong, Tracy, Henry, Parker, thank you so much. And I wish you all the best with this beautiful film. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Right.